Hi, I'm Elena Rodriguez, and I'm 31 years old. My mother's fist connected with my jaw so hard I tasted copper for 3 days. When I tried to call my sister for help, she hung up on me, saying, "You probably deserved it anyway." My father watched it happen from his armchair, sipping his evening whiskey, and simply said, "She wouldn't hit you if you weren't so difficult." They thought their silence would bury me. They had no idea I was about to dig myself out. If you've ever been betrayed by those you loved most, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you're ready to hear how I finally stood up for myself after years of manipulation. Christmas Eve has always carried a particular weight in the Rodriguez household. Not the warm, anticipatory kind that most families feel, but something heavier, like walking on glass while pretending everything was made of silk. This year felt different, though I couldn't put my finger on why. Maybe it was because I'd finally saved enough to put a down payment on my own apartment, or maybe it was because at 31, I was tired of tiptoeing around the landmines of my mother's moods. I stood in the kitchen, methodically washing the endless parade of dishes that accumulated whenever the family gathered. The sink was filled with remnants of Christmas dinner, gravy-stained plates, wine glasses with lipstick marks, serving bowls that had held my grandmother's recipes, now prepared by hands that had never learned the gentleness that should come with family traditions. "Elena, you missed a spot on that platter," my mother's voice cut through the relative peace like a blade. Carmen Rodriguez was a woman who found fault the way other people found loose change, everywhere, and with a sense of entitlement to point it out. I turned the platter over, examining it under the harsh fluorescent light. It was spotless. "I don't see anything, Mom." She snatched it from my hands, her fingers deliberate and rough. "Right there. Are you blind? This is why you can't keep a decent job, Elena. No attention to detail." The comment hit its intended mark. I'd been laid off from my marketing position 3 months ago, not because of my work quality, but because the startup I worked for had run out of funding. But facts had never mattered much in this house. Only the narrative that kept everyone else comfortable mattered. "I see it now," I lied, taking the platter back. The lie came easily. After 31 years, I'd learned that sometimes peace was worth more than truth. From the living room, I could hear my brother Miguel's laugh, loud, confident, the sound of someone who had never questioned whether he belonged. He was telling a story about his promotion at the law firm, his third in 5 years. Every word was met with delighted murmurs from my father and aunts, as if Miguel had personally hung the moon. "Elena's probably jealous," I heard my cousin Sophia say, her voice carrying that particular tone people use when they want to sound like they're joking but aren't. "Still living at home at 31. I paused, dish rag in hand, waiting for someone to correct her. To mention that I'd been saving money, that I was days away from signing a lease, that I'd been supporting myself since I was 19 while also helping with family expenses. The correction never came. "Some people are just late bloomers," my father's voice drifted in, accompanied by the sound of ice clinking against glass. "Though at Elena's age, you have to wonder if the blooming is ever going to happen." The dish rag in my hand dripped soap onto the floor. I stared at the small puddle forming at my feet, thinking about how easily messes spread when no one bothered to clean them up right away. "Elena, you're dripping water everywhere." My mother's sharp tone made me flinch. She appeared beside me with the speed of someone who had been waiting for an excuse. "Honestly, it's like living with a child." "Sorry, The blow came without warning. Her palm connected with my cheek in a sharp crack that seemed to echo off the kitchen tiles. My head snapped to the side, and for a moment, the only sound was the dishwasher humming its mechanical rhythm. "Don't make excuses," she hissed. "Clean it up." I bent down slowly, my cheek throbbing, and mopped up the water with the dish rag. From the living room, the conversation continued without missing a beat. Miguel was now discussing his new car. No one had heard the slap, or if they had, they decided it wasn't worth acknowledging. As I stood up, I caught sight of my reflection in the window above the sink. My cheek was already reddening, a hand-shaped mark beginning to bloom across my skin. I looked like a ghost haunting my own life. "I think I'm going to head out," I said quietly. My mother didn't look up from where she was now arranging cookies on a plate with military precision. Running away again. Typical. I untied my apron and hung it on its hook. I'm not running away. I'm just. You're just what? Going to sulk in your room like you did when you were 16? Some things never change, Elena. I stood there for a moment, hand on the kitchen door, waiting for something that never came. An apology. A recognition that hitting your adult daughter isn't normal family behavior. Some acknowledgement that I was a person deserving of basic respect. Instead, I heard Miguel's voice from the other room. Where's Elena? I wanted to tell her about the case I won last week. Oh, you know Elena, my mother called back, her voice light and dismissive. She gets moody around the holidays. Probably having one of her episodes. Episodes? As if my natural human responses to being treated poorly were symptoms of some mysterious condition rather than entirely reasonable reactions to unreasonable treatment. I pushed through the kitchen door and walked past the living room where my family was arranged in a tableau of holiday cheer. Miguel was sprawled in the good chair, tie loosened, gesturing with a wine glass. My father was in his usual spot, remote control within easy reach. My aunts and cousins filled the couch and additional chairs, all leaning in toward Miguel as if he were a campfire they needed to warm themselves by. Elena! Miguel called out when he spotted me. Come sit. I was just about to tell everyone about the settlement I negotiated. 6 figures. That's great, Miguel, I said, pulling my coat from the closet. Congratulations. Where are you going? He asked, his brow furrowing with what might have been genuine concern if you didn't know better. Home. But you are home, Sophia chimed in with a laugh that was all edges. Unless you finally got that apartment you've been talking about for years. Actually, I said, slipping my arms into my coat sleeves, I signed the lease on Thursday. The room went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of people processing good news, but the awkward quiet of people who had been caught talking about someone as if they weren't capable of changing their circumstances. Oh, my father said finally. Well, that's unexpected. Why is it unexpected? I asked. I told you I was saving money for a place. We didn't think you were serious, my mother said, appearing in the doorway with her cookie plate. You've been saying that for years. I've been saying it for 8 months. And I was serious. Miguel set down his wine glass. Elena, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. If you want to stay here while you get back on your feet. I don't need to get back on my feet, I interrupted. I was never off them. The statement hung in the air like smoke. I could see them processing it, trying to reconcile this information with the narrative they'd built about me. The failure, the disappointment, the one who couldn't get her life together. Well, my mother said finally, her voice tight with something that might have been anger or might have been embarrassment. I suppose we'll see how long this independence lasts. I zipped up my coat and picked up my purse. I suppose you will. As I reached for the door handle, I heard Miguel call out, Elena, wait. Don't leave like this. I turned back to face the room full of people who shared my DNA, but seemed incapable of seeing me as anything more than a cautionary tale. Like what, Miguel? Angry, he said. You always leave angry. I looked at him, really looked at him. This brother who had never once asked why I always left angry, who had never wondered if there might be a reason beyond my supposed emotional instability. I'm not angry, I said quietly. I'm tired. And with that, I walked out into the December night, leaving behind the warm glow of their living room and the cold comfort of their indifference. The drive to my current apartment, a studio I rented month to month above a bakery, took 15 minutes through streets lined with Christmas lights. Other families were probably settling in for the night, exhausted from good food and better company. I pulled into my parking spot and sat in my car for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Isabella, who lived 3 states away and managed to stay just distant enough to maintain the family's golden child status without having to witness the daily dynamics up close. Mom said you left early again. Everything okay? I stared at the message, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. How do you text someone a lifetime of small cruelties? How do you explain that everything okay isn't a question you know how to answer anymore? I typed back, I'm fine. Just tired. She responded immediately, you should try to be more patient with Mom. She's getting older. I deleted 3 different responses before settling on, I know. Then I turned off my phone and went upstairs to my small apartment, where the silence was comfortable instead of judgmental, and the only person whose expectations I had to manage was myself. That night, I sat on my small couch with a cup of tea, looking through the folder of documents I'd need for Thursday's lease signing. Employment verification, bank statements, references. Proof that I was a responsible adult capable of managing my own life. Proof that the narrative my family had constructed about me wasn't the whole truth. As I organized the papers, something nagged at me. Not regret about leaving early, but something else. A memory trying to surface. I walked to my closet and pulled down a shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were the things I'd saved over the years, photos, letters, small mementos that hadn't fit anywhere else. I hadn't looked through it in months, but tonight felt like the right time for archaeology of the self. Near the bottom, I found what I was looking for without knowing I'd been looking for it. A small notebook with a blue cover, the kind they sell in the school supply aisle for 50 cents. I opened it and saw my own handwriting, but younger, shakier. Elena's Important Things, age 14. I flipped through pages of teenage documentation. Lists of books I wanted to read, song lyrics I'd copied down, and then something that made my breath catch. Times Mom hit me this year. Below it, a list of dates with brief descriptions. January 3rd, hit my arm for leaving dishes in sink. January 18th, slapped face for talking back. I asked why Miguel doesn't have to do chores. February 2nd, pushed me into wall for getting B+ instead of A. The list went on. Page after page of careful documentation in my 14-year-old handwriting. I had no memory of writing this, but here it was, evidence that some part of me had known even then that this wasn't normal. That I needed to record it, even if I didn't know why. I flipped to a page near the end of the notebook. The handwriting was different, more mature, but still recognizably mine. I think I'm going crazy. Everyone acts like this is normal. Miguel never gets hit. Dad never gets hit. Even when Miguel broke the lamp last week, Mom just told him to be more careful. When I broke a glass 2 months ago, she hit me so hard my ear rang for hours. I asked Mrs. Patterson at school if all families are like this, but I didn't know how to ask without telling her everything. She said some families show love differently, but this doesn't feel like love. This feels like I'm being punished for existing. Maybe I am dramatic like they say. Maybe I am too sensitive. But why does being sensitive mean I deserve to be hurt? I closed the notebook and set it on my coffee table. 14-year-old Elena had been keeping records. She'd known something was wrong, even when everyone around her was telling her it was right. I picked up my phone and called my sister. Elena? It's late. Is everything okay? Isabella, do you remember Mom hitting us when we were kids? There was a pause. Hitting us? Elena, what are you talking about? Do you remember her slapping us, pushing us, hitting us when we did something wrong? Elena, Mom disciplined us when we misbehaved. That's what parents do. Do you remember her hitting Miguel? Another pause, longer this time. Miguel was a good kid. He didn't need much discipline. And what was I? Elena, you were difficult sometimes. You know that. I closed my eyes. Isabella, I found a notebook from when I was 14. I was documenting every time she hit me. I documented dozens of incidents in just 1 year. Elena, you were always writing dramatic stories. You had such an imagination. This wasn't a story. It was dated. It was specific. Even if that's true, Elena, that was almost 20 years ago. People parented differently then. You can't judge the past by today's standards. Isabella, she slapped me tonight. 2 hours ago. I'm 31 years old and she slapped me for dripping water on the floor. Silence stretched between us. When Isabella finally spoke, her voice was careful, measured. Elena, are you sure? Are you sure that's what happened? Sometimes when we're stressed or tired, we can misinterpret. I hung up. I sat in my small apartment, notebook in my lap, and realized that I was completely alone in my own truth. The people who were supposed to believe me, support me, witness my reality, they had collectively decided that my experiences were either exaggerated, misremembered, or justified. But I had evidence. 14-year-old Elena had left me evidence. The next morning, I called in sick to my temp job and drove to the public library. I found a quiet corner in the research section and opened my laptop. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. I started with simple searches: adult children of abusive parents, family scapegoating, gaslighting by family members. What I found made my chest tight with recognition. Article after article described patterns I knew intimately. The way abusive families often have one child who bears the brunt of dysfunction while other children are protected or favored. The way family members will close ranks to deny abuse rather than confront it. The way victims are often painted as dramatic or too sensitive when they try to speak up. I learned terms I'd never heard before: flying monkeys, family members who enable abuse, DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender, trauma bonding, the way abuse victims sometimes defend their abusers. I read testimonies from other people, mostly women, who described experiences that mirrored my own. The casual violence. The constant criticism. The way their achievements were minimized while their siblings were celebrated. The way they were blamed for family problems that existed long before they were born. For the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't crazy. I wasn't too sensitive. I wasn't imagining things or being dramatic. I was the family scapegoat. I spent 3 hours reading, taking notes, printing articles. When I finally packed up my things, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: validated. That evening, I sat down with my 14-year-old notebook and a new one. This time, I was going to document everything with the perspective of an adult who understood what she was dealing with. I started with the slap from Christmas Eve, but then I kept going. I wrote about the constant criticism, the way my achievements were dismissed, the way I was excluded from family decisions and conversations. I wrote about Miguel's golden child status and Isabella's willful blindness. I wrote about my father's passive complicity and my mother's active cruelty. As I wrote, patterns emerged that I'd never seen before. The way the abuse escalated around holidays and family gatherings. The way it intensified whenever I showed signs of independence or success. The way it was always justified as being for my own good or because I needed to learn. I wrote until my hand cramped, filling page after page with a lifetime of accumulated evidence. When I finally stopped, I had 47 pages of documentation spanning 17 years. I was going to need help processing this, but first I had something else to do. Thursday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of winter light that makes everything look like it's been drained of color. I dressed carefully, professional but not overdressed, confident but not aggressive. I was going to sign my lease, and then I was going to have a conversation that was 17 years overdue. The apartment was perfect in its imperfection. A one-bedroom on the second floor of a converted Victorian house, with hardwood floors that creaked in friendly ways and windows that let in more light than any space I'd ever lived in. The landlord, Mrs. Chen, was a woman in her 60s who ran a small accounting firm from the first floor. "You'll be a good tenant," she said as I signed the papers. "I can tell. You have honest eyes." Honest eyes. When was the last time someone had said something like that to me? "Thank you," I said, handing back the signed lease. "This feels like a new beginning." "New beginnings are good," she said, tucking the papers into a folder. "Sometimes we need to start over to remember who we really are." I drove back to my family's house to collect my things. My mother was in the kitchen when I walked in, arranging flowers in a vase with the same militaristic precision she brought to everything. "You're back early," she said without looking up. "Did something go wrong with your apartment fantasy?" "I signed the lease," I said simply. "I'm moving out this weekend." Her hand stilled on the flowers. This weekend? Elena, that's very sudden. Maybe you should think about this more carefully. I've been thinking about it for months, Mom. But what about your debt? What about your job situation? What about it? I interrupted. I have savings. I have income. I have a plan. She turned to face me then, and I saw something in her expression I hadn't expected: panic. Elena, be reasonable. You can't just run away from your problems. What problems, Mom? Your problems, she said, gesturing vaguely. Your inability to commit to anything. Your history of poor decisions. Your tendency to blame everyone else for your shortcomings. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I'd been preparing for without knowing it. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to give me an honest answer. She straightened, her defensive walls already rising. What? Do you think it's normal for a mother to hit her 31-year-old daughter? Elena, I don't know what you're talking about. Last night. In the kitchen. You slapped me. I did not slap you. I've never slapped you. You're being dramatic again. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I scrolled to the photo I'd taken of my face before going to bed the night before, the red mark clearly visible across my cheek. Her face went white. I've been documenting things, I said quietly. For a long time. Elena, put that away. If someone sees that, they'll get the wrong idea. What's the wrong idea, Mom? That you hit me? I was disciplining you. You were making a mess and you needed to learn. I'm 31 years old. I don't need discipline. I need respect. She turned back to her flowers, her movements sharp and agitated. I don't know why you insist on making everything so difficult, Elena. We're your family. We love you. How is hitting me loving? I don't hit you. You're exaggerating like always. I pulled out the notebook, the old one from when I was 14. I found this yesterday. She glanced at it and something flickered across her face. Recognition, maybe. Or fear. What is that? It's a record I kept when I was 14. 43 documented incidents of you hitting me in 1 year. That's a child's imagination. You were always making up stories. January 18, 2006. You slapped me for asking why Miguel didn't have to do chores. February 2, 2006. You pushed me into the wall for getting a B+ instead of an A. March 15, 2006. You hit my arm for forgetting to water the plants. With each date I read, she became smaller, more defensive. Elena, stop it. Those aren't real. You're remembering wrong. Mom, I documented it. In detail. With dates and times and witnesses. Witnesses? What witnesses? Miguel was there for most of it. Dad was there for some of it. Neither of them ever stopped you. She was quiet for a long moment, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted and readjusted the flowers. Even if some of those things happened, she said finally, you were a difficult child. You pushed boundaries. You needed firm guidance. Did Miguel need firm guidance? Miguel was different. How was he different? He was easier. He listened. He didn't argue about everything. So because I asked questions and had opinions, I deserved to be hit? I never said you deserved anything. You're twisting my words. I closed the notebook and looked at this woman who had raised me, who had fed me and clothed me and driven me to school and also systematically taught me that I was worthless. Mom, I need you to acknowledge what happened. Nothing happened, Elena. You had a normal childhood. You're choosing to remember it differently because you need someone to blame for your problems. What problems? Your problems. She exploded. Your inability to maintain relationships. Your job instability. Your constant negativity. Your tendency to push people away. Maybe I push people away because I learned that people who claim to love me will hurt me. Elena, that's ridiculous. We never hurt you. We disciplined you when necessary and we supported you when you needed it. When did you support me? She opened her mouth, then closed it. I waited. We let you live here rent-free. We fed you. You provided basic necessities that parents are supposed to provide. That's not support, Mom. That's obligation. Elena, I don't understand what you want from me. I want you to acknowledge that hitting a child, hitting anyone, is wrong. I want you to acknowledge that I didn't deserve to be treated the way you treated me. I want you to take responsibility for the damage you did. Damage? Her voice was getting shrill. What damage? You're fine. You're healthy. You have a job. You're getting your own apartment. You're successful. I'm successful despite how you treated me, not because of it. Elena, you're being unreasonable. Families discipline children. It's normal. It's necessary. Did your mother hit you? She went very still. That's different. How is it different? It just is. I studied her face, seeing something I'd never noticed before. The way her jaw tightened when she was holding back words. The way her hands clenched when she was fighting off memories. She did hit you, I said quietly. Your mother hit you. Elena, stop it. And you told yourself it was normal. You told yourself you deserved it. You told yourself it was discipline. Elena, stop. And then you did the same thing to me. Elena, stop. She screamed, her face red with rage and something else. Something that looked like pain. We stared at each other across the kitchen, two women bound by DNA and damaged by a legacy of normalized violence that stretched back generations. I'm breaking the cycle, I said quietly. There's no cycle to break. There's no pattern. There's just life, and life is hard, and sometimes people do things they regret, but that doesn't make them monsters. I didn't say you were a monster, Mom. I said you hit me. And I said it was wrong. She turned away from me, her shoulders shaking. For a moment I thought she might be crying. For a moment I thought we might have a breakthrough. Instead, she straightened up and turned back to me with eyes like ice. If you want to leave, Elena, leave. But don't expect to come crawling back when your little independence experiment fails. And don't expect this family to tolerate your dramatic accusations and your victim mentality. I don't expect anything from this family anymore, I said. That's the point. I left her in the kitchen and went upstairs to pack my things. It didn't take long. I'd been unconsciously preparing for this departure for years, keeping my possessions minimal and portable. As I carried my suitcases to my car, Miguel appeared in the driveway. Elena, what are you doing? Moving out. Right now? Today? Yes. He looked confused, like he'd walked into the middle of a movie and couldn't figure out the plot. Why? What happened? Nothing happened, Miguel. I'm just ready to live my own life. But Mom's upset. She's crying. I paused with my hand on the car door. She's crying. Yeah. She says you accused her of terrible things. She says you're trying to destroy the family. I looked at my brother, this man who had been protected from every harsh word, every raised hand, every moment of cruelty that had shaped my childhood, and realized that he genuinely had no idea what he was talking about. Miguel, do you remember Mom hitting me when we were kids? He frowned. Hitting you? Elena, what are you talking about? Do you remember her slapping me, pushing me, hitting me when I did something wrong? Elena, Mom never hit you. She barely even raised her voice. You're remembering wrong. I stared at him. You were there, Miguel. You saw it happen. Elena, I think you might need to talk to someone. A professional. This isn't normal, making up these kinds of memories. And there it was. The moment I realized that even if I had video evidence, even if I had witnesses, even if I had a team of psychologists confirming my memories, my family would never acknowledge my reality. Because acknowledging my reality would mean acknowledging their complicity. It would mean admitting that they had participated in or witnessed or ignored years of systematic abuse. It would mean taking responsibility for the fact that they had failed to protect a child. It was easier to decide I was crazy. You're right, Miguel, I said, getting into my car. I do need to talk to someone. But not for the reasons you think. I drove away from the house where I'd spent 31 years learning that I was too much and not enough, too sensitive and too dramatic, too difficult and too damaged. I drove toward my new apartment, where the only person's opinion of me that mattered was my own. That night, in my new apartment with my boxes still unpacked and my furniture still arranged awkwardly, I sat on my couch with my old notebook and my new one. I had a decision to make. I could let this end here. I could move on with my life, maintain minimal contact with my family, and try to heal from a distance. I could build a new life based on the truth I now understood about my past. Or I could do something more. I thought about other 14-year-old girls who might be keeping notebooks like mine. I thought about other Elenas who might be sitting in kitchens right now, absorbing blows and absorbing blame and slowly learning to believe that they deserved both. I opened my laptop and started typing. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I am 31 years old. For most of my life, I believed that I was the problem in my family. I believed that I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too difficult. I believed that the violence I experienced was discipline, and the emotional abuse I endured was love. I was wrong. This is my story. I wrote for 3 hours, documenting everything with the clarity and perspective that only distance could provide. I wrote about the physical violence and the emotional manipulation. I wrote about the gaslighting and the scapegoating. I wrote about the family dynamics that protected some children while sacrificing others. When I finished, I had 12 pages of truth. Raw, uncomfortable, undeniable truth. I posted it on a blog I created called Breaking the Silence. I shared it on social media. I sent it to extended family members who had always wondered why I seemed so troubled compared to my siblings. Within 6 hours, my phone was ringing. The first call was from my mother. Elena, take down that post immediately. You're destroying this family with your lies. They're not lies, Mom. They are lies. And if you don't remove them, we'll have no choice but to take legal action. For what? Telling the truth. For slander. For defamation. For trying to destroy innocent people with your sick fantasies. I hung up. The second call was from Miguel. Elena, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would you air family business online? Why would you make up these horrible stories about Mom? I didn't make them up, Miguel. Elena, you need help. Serious help. You're having some kind of breakdown. Miguel, do you remember when I was 8 and I asked for a drink of water during dinner? Do you remember what happened? Elena, I don't know what game you're playing, but… Mom threw the glass at me. It hit the wall next to my head and shattered. You were sitting right there. Silence. Miguel? Elena, that didn't happen. Yes, it did. You looked right at me after it happened. You looked scared. Elena, you're sick. You need to delete that post and get help. He hung up. The third call was from Isabella. Elena, I just read your blog post. I can't believe you would do something so cruel. Cruel to whom? To Mom? To all of us. How could you write those things about our mother? She loves you, Elena. She's always loved you. Isabella, love doesn't look like violence. Elena, you were disciplined. That's not the same as violence. What would you call it if a stranger hit you the way Mom hit me? That's different. How is it different? Because she's our mother. Because she was trying to teach you right from wrong. By hitting me? By disciplining you when you misbehaved. Isabella, I documented 43 incidents in 1 year when I was 14. Does that sound like occasional discipline to you? Elena, even if that's true, even if some of those things happened, why would you share it with the world? Why would you humiliate our family like this? Because other families need to know that this isn't normal. Because other children need to know that they don't deserve to be treated this way. Elena, you're being selfish. You're hurting people who love you to make yourself feel better. Isabella, do you know what happened the last time I was at Mom and Dad's house? You left early because you were having one of your moods. She slapped me for dripping water on the floor. Silence. Isabella. Elena, maybe you misunderstood. I hung up. By the end of the week, I had received dozens of messages. Some were from family members and family friends, telling me I was a liar, a troublemaker, an ungrateful daughter who was destroying innocent people for attention. But others were different. Elena, thank you for sharing your story. I thought I was the only one. Elena, reading your post helped me understand my own childhood. I'm 45 years old and I just realized that what my parents did to me wasn't normal. Elena, my daughter is going through something similar with my ex-husband's family. Your story is helping me understand what she needs. Elena, I'm a teacher and I just recognized some patterns in one of my students. Thank you for helping me see what I was missing. Those messages kept me going when the attacks from my family became too intense to bear. 3 weeks after I posted my story, I received a message that changed everything. Elena, my name is Dr. Sarah Martinez. I'm a clinical psychologist who specializes in family trauma. I read your blog post and I wonder if you'd be interested in participating in a research study we're conducting on family scapegoating and its long-term effects. We're also looking for people who would be willing to share their stories publicly to help educate other families and professionals who work with children. I stared at the message for a long time. This was it, the choice between moving on quietly and stepping forward loudly. I thought about 14-year-old Elena documenting abuse in a notebook because some part of her knew it wasn't right. I thought about all the 14-year-old Elenas who were sitting in their rooms right now, wondering if they were crazy or if their families were cruel. I thought about the teacher who had never been trained to recognize the signs of family scapegoating. The pediatrician who had seen my bruises but accepted my explanations. The guidance counselor who had been told I was difficult and had believed it without question. I wrote back to Dr. Martinez. Dr. Martinez, I would be honored to participate in your research. If my story can help even one family recognize these patterns, or help one child understand that they're not the problem, then everything I've been through will have served a purpose. 2 months later, I found myself sitting in a university conference room with Dr. Martinez and 5 other adults who had similar stories. We called ourselves the Invisible Children, people who had been scapegoated, gaslit, and systematically devalued by our own families. There was Marcus, whose parents had convinced him he was learning disabled when he was actually gifted, because his intelligence threatened his father's ego. There was Amy, whose mother had told her she was too ugly to ever find love, while praising her sister's beauty at every opportunity. There was David, whose every achievement had been minimized while his brother's mediocre efforts were celebrated. Listening to their stories was like looking in a funhouse mirror. Everything was slightly different, but the core patterns were identical. The scapegoat child who absorbed all the family's dysfunction. The golden child who could do no wrong. The enabling parent who participated through silence. The flying monkeys who enforced the narrative. The most insidious part, Dr. Martinez explained, is how these families convince the scapegoated child that they're the problem. The child grows up believing they're too sensitive, too difficult, too much. They internalize the blame for abuse that was never their fault. She looked around the room at our nodding heads. You all survived by learning to question your own perceptions. But now you need to learn to trust them again. Over the following months, I worked with Dr. Martinez to develop educational materials for teachers, pediatricians, social workers, and other professionals who work with children. We created presentations that helped people recognize the signs of family scapegoating and understand how it differed from normal family discipline. I spoke at conferences, sharing my story and teaching others how to identify children who might be suffering in silence. I wrote articles for professional journals and popular publications. I appeared on podcasts and webinars. Each time I shared my story, I received messages from people who recognized themselves in my experiences. Some were children who finally understood that their family dynamics weren't normal. Others were adults who were realizing, sometimes decades later, that they hadn't deserved the treatment they'd received. But the most meaningful messages came from parents. Elena, I just realized I've been treating my youngest daughter the way my parents treated me. Your story helped me see the pattern. I'm getting help and I'm going to do better. Elena, I always wondered why my son seemed so anxious and withdrawn compared to my other children. After reading your story, I realized I've been unconsciously scapegoating him. Thank you for helping me see what I was doing wrong. Elena, my ex-husband's family has been treating my daughter the way your family treated you. Your story gave me the language to explain to the court what was happening. We got custody changed and my daughter is finally safe. Those messages reminded me why this work mattered. Breaking cycles of abuse wasn't just about my own healing, it was about preventing other children from experiencing what I had experienced. But the work came with a cost. My family's reaction to my increasing public profile was swift and vicious. They hired a lawyer who sent me cease and desist letters, demanding I stop spreading lies about them. They created social media accounts specifically to discredit me, claiming I was mentally ill and seeking attention. Miguel appeared on a local talk show to defend our mother's reputation, describing me as a troubled individual who had always had difficulty distinguishing reality from fantasy. Isabella wrote a letter to the editor of our hometown newspaper, painting me as an ungrateful daughter who was destroying a loving family for personal gain. The attacks were painful, but they also served a purpose. They demonstrated in real time exactly the kinds of tactics that abusive families use to silence their victims. Dr. Martinez and I used my family's response as a case study in how scapegoated children are further victimized when they speak their truth. Notice how they're not denying the specific incidents, Dr. Martinez pointed out during one of our sessions. They're attacking your credibility, your mental health, your motives. This is textbook Darvo, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. She was right. In all their public statements, my family never said, "These things didn't happen." Instead, they said, "Elena is lying, Elena is sick, Elena is vindictive." They focused on discrediting me rather than disputing my claims. A year after I first shared my story, I received a phone call that I'll never forget. "Elena? This is going to sound strange, but I think you might be my cousin." The voice belonged to a woman named Sophia, not my cousin Sophia, but a different Sophia who lived across the country. "My grandmother was Carmen Rodriguez's sister," she explained. "I found your blog when I was researching our family history, and I recognized some of the patterns you described." My heart started racing. "What do you mean?" "My grandmother, your great-aunt Maria, she used to tell stories about their childhood. About how their mother used to beat Carmen specifically, while leaving the other children alone. She said Carmen was always the one who got in trouble, always the one who got hit, even when she hadn't done anything wrong." I sat down heavily. "Carmen is my mother." "I know. And according to my grandmother, your mother was the scapegoat in her family, just like you were in yours." The conversation lasted 2 hours. Sophia shared family stories that had been passed down through generations, stories about great-great-grandmothers who favored some children while terrorizing others, about patterns of violence and favoritism that stretched back as far as anyone could remember. "My grandmother always said that Carmen turned out mean because of how she was treated," Sophia told me. "She said hurt people, and Carmen never learned how to break the cycle." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, my beautiful, peaceful apartment where no one yelled at me or hit me or told me I was too much, and cried. Not for myself, but for my mother. For the little girl she had been, absorbing violence and learning that it was normal. For the woman she had become, passing that violence on to the next generation because it was the only way she knew how to parent. I cried for all the generations of women in my family who had suffered in silence, who had normalized abuse because acknowledging it would have meant confronting an entire system of dysfunction. But I also felt something else, relief. Understanding my mother's history didn't excuse her behavior, but it explained it. And more importantly, it confirmed what I already knew, that breaking the cycle was the most important thing I could do. That night, I wrote a new blog post titled "The Inheritance of Pain: How Family Trauma Passes Through Generations." In it, I shared what I had learned about my family's history and talked about how cycles of abuse perpetuate themselves when they go unexamined and unaddressed. I wrote about compassion for those who hurt us, while still maintaining boundaries to protect ourselves. The response was overwhelming. I received hundreds of messages from people who recognized similar patterns in their own family histories. People who had traced violence and dysfunction back through generations and were now committed to ensuring it stopped with them. Dr. Martinez invited me to co-author a research paper about intergenerational trauma and family scapegoating. We studied families like mine, families where abuse was normalized and passed down like a genetic trait, where children learned to accept violence as love and silence as loyalty. Our research showed that family scapegoating wasn't random. Scapegoated children often shared certain characteristics. They were sensitive, questioning, empathetic, or somehow different from what the family considered normal. They were the truth tellers, the ones who noticed inconsistencies and asked uncomfortable questions. Scapegoated children often grow up to be the healthiest members of their families, Dr. Martinez explained in one of our presentations, because they're forced to develop critical thinking skills and emotional resilience. They learn to question narratives and seek truth. They become the cycle breakers. 3 years after I moved into my first apartment, I stood in front of a conference room full of social workers, psychologists, and educators. I was presenting our research on family scapegoating and discussing strategies for identifying and supporting children who were experiencing what I had experienced. During the Q&A session, a young woman in the back row raised her hand. Ms. Rodriguez, what would you say to a child who's currently living in a scapegoating situation? How can they protect themselves when they can't leave? I looked at her carefully. Something in her voice suggested this wasn't an academic question. I would tell them that they're not crazy, I said. I would tell them that their perceptions are valid, even when everyone around them is saying otherwise. I would tell them to document what's happening, write it down, take pictures if it's safe to do so, tell trusted adults outside the family. I paused, making eye contact with her. I would tell them that they're not the problem, they're not too sensitive, and they're not dramatic. I would tell them that what's happening to them is not normal, and it's not their fault. And I would tell them that surviving their childhood is just the first step. The real work is learning to thrive despite what they've been through. After the presentation, the young woman approached me. Her name was Jessica, and she was a social work student whose professors had recommended my research after she disclosed some of her own family experiences. I've been keeping notebooks since I was 12, she told me. Just like you did. I documented everything because I knew I needed proof that it really happened. We talked for an hour about her experiences, her family dynamics, and her plans for the future. As she prepared to leave, she turned back to me. Ms. Rodriguez, I want you to know that your story probably saved my life. I was starting to think I really was crazy, that maybe I really was the problem. Reading about your experiences helped me understand that I wasn't alone. She paused, tears in her eyes. I'm going to be a social worker because of you. I want to help other kids like us. As I watched her walk away, I thought about 14-year-old Elena with her blue notebook, documenting abuse because some part of her knew it wasn't right. I thought about all the children who were sitting in their rooms right now, writing down incidents that adults would later tell them were discipline or normal family dynamics. I thought about the ripple effects of speaking truth. How one person's courage to break silence could inspire another person to question their reality, which could inspire another person to seek help, which could inspire another person to change how they treated their own children. 5 years after I first shared my story, I received a message that brought everything full circle. Elena, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm Sophia, your cousin Sophia. The one who used to make fun of you at family gatherings. I remembered her. She was the one who had called me a failure for living at home at 31. I wanted to apologize. I've been in therapy for the past 2 years, trying to understand why I always felt compelled to put you down. My therapist helped me realize that I was protecting myself by attacking you. I was afraid that if I defended you, I might become a target too. She went on to explain that she had started recognizing similar patterns in her own relationship with her teenage daughter. how she had been unconsciously favoring her son while being hypercritical of her daughter. I read your research and I realized I was creating the same dynamics in my own family that we grew up with. I got help and I'm working to change. My daughter and I are in therapy together, trying to repair our relationship." She ended the message with something I never expected to hear from any member of my family. "Elena, you were right. About everything. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it, and I'm sorry you had to go through what you went through. Thank you for being brave enough to speak up. You probably saved my daughter from experiencing what you experienced." As I read her message, I realized that this was what healing looked like. Not a dramatic reconciliation or a tearful apology from my immediate family, they were still committed to their narrative of denial. But quiet acknowledgments from unexpected sources. Behavior changes in the next generation. Cycles interrupted before they could fully form. I had broken the silence, and the silence had broken the cycle. Today, I live in a house I bought with money I earned from speaking engagements and book sales. I have a small garden where I grow vegetables and flowers, and a cat named Truth who sits on my lap while I write. I still have contact with my mother occasionally, brief, supervised phone calls during which we discuss weather and current events and carefully avoid any topics that might trigger her defensiveness. She will never acknowledge what happened. She will never apologize. She will never take responsibility for the damage she caused. But she also can't hurt me anymore. Because I know who I am now and I know what I'm worth, and I know that her inability to love me properly says nothing about my lovability and everything about her limitations. Miguel and Isabella have both blocked me on social media and refused to speak to me. They've chosen to maintain the family's narrative rather than confront uncomfortable truths. I've made peace with their choice, even though it still hurts sometimes. The work I do now, speaking, writing, researching, educating, has become my life's purpose. I can't save the child I was, but I can help save the children who are living what I lived. Every email I receive from a teacher who recognizes the signs of family scapegoating, every message from a parent who realizes they need to change their behavior, every note from a young adult who finally understands that their childhood wasn't normal. These are the victories that make everything worthwhile. I keep the blue notebook on my bookshelf, next to the dozens of journals I've filled since then. Sometimes I look at that 14-year-old handwriting and feel proud of the girl who was brave enough to document her truth, even when everyone around her was telling her it wasn't real. She planted the seeds of her own liberation without even knowing it. And now, 36 years old and finally free, I tend those seeds every day by helping other people plant their own. The silence is broken. The cycle is interrupted. The truth has set me free. And that truth is simple. Every child deserves to be loved without conditions, protected without question, and valued without reservation. Every child deserves to grow up believing they matter, that their feelings are valid, that their voice has worth. I didn't get that childhood. But because I survived without it, other children might not have to. That's enough. That's everything. Have you ever felt like the black sheep in your family? Have you ever wondered if your memories were real or if you were too sensitive? Your truth matters. Your voice matters. You matter. The silence ends when we decide to speak. The cycle breaks when we refuse to repeat it. The healing begins when we choose to believe our own experiences over other people's narratives. Trust yourself. Document your truth. Speak when you're ready. And remember, you were never the problem. You were just the one brave enough to notice that there was one.